It's not all fun and games for sheep, though. One of the points that Peter raises is that sometimes sheep are shorn too early, that they then get cold, that this is just purely for humans and there's no thought given to the well-being of the sheep. Any response to that?
Yeah, I think the best judge of when to shear a sheep is the person who's farming them, not Peter. And really, Peter have a particular worldview, and they're pretty keen to make sure, or they're very keen to have everyone else conform to their worldview, and they don't care how they get there. You know, I think, you know, they're like zealots, really.
So if you could get one message across to them, Miles, what would that be? Sheep have been bred for thousands of years to produce wool, and if the animals are not shorn on an annual basis, at least, they, you know, there's major animal health issues involved with that. So the message I'd like to get them: wool is a miracle fibre, and it should be used more than it currently is, and it has all these qualities that are overlooked in the debate at the moment. It certainly doesn't produce microfibres or what have you that synthetics do, that end up in the food chain and you know, in the waterways, and it's biodegradable. It's just, you know, it's nature's miracle. New Zealand has annual earnings of $752 million from wool. Do you think federated farmers should be out there telling Peter to back off? Yes, and we are, but I guess, you know, as I said, it's pretty hard to compete when you have high-profile people who seem to have media at the beck and call, such as Alicia Silverstone, Pink and co, who are, you know, on this campaign, and you know, it's just unfortunate. And, you know, I guess I just, you know, hopefully the general public are a bit more better informed than perhaps we give them credit for. Okay, good to talk to you. Appreciate that. Miles Anderson from Federated Farmers. I think Sam Neill and some of the cast from Hunt of the Wilder People, they'd be keen to get out there and extol the virtues of wool, I would suspect.
Imagine
we've got our own stars.
30 million examples of Shrek the sheep all over the country. It's a you know.
Absolutely. How many jerseys were made from that? I can't remember. It was quite a few. Right, the cat story. We've got to finish on the cat story today. I heard it on the news at 4. A Wellington cat may not have used up all of his 9 lives, but spent 9 years apparently living rough before being reunited with his family. The cat's name, Getty, went missing from the Maybe household when they lived in Berhampore, and they thought that she had been lost in a nearby gully. But thanks to her microchip, she turned up at the SPCA and the family went down. And this is the bit that tickles me. I think the owner went in there and recognised Getty straight away. I don't recognise my children some days. How the hell can you walk in there after 9 years and recognise your own cat? Have you guys got cats?
I do. Dusty Springfield. Would you like to see a picture, Ali? I'll email you one. I like how people keep saying, why did it happen now? I'm like, Getty was waiting to make sure Gareth Morgan didn't get in.
I think she went to Gloriavale for 9 years and decided to come back.
Stunning story. 9 years. It might be a record. Thank you both of you for being on the program today, Joan McCarroll and Mark Knopf-Thomas. I'll be back with you tomorrow as Jim Mora is on Sunday for Wallace Chapman. News is next.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, a survey obtained by Checkpoint reveals 98% of 272 nurses at the county's Manukau DHB have experienced short staffing. What does that mean? Also tonight, Winston Peters does a U-turn on plans for a referendum to abolish the Maori seats. Vanuatu's government orders the mass evacuation of all 11,000 residents on a volcano-threatened island. The Black Ferns finally received the welcome home they deserve after winning the Women's Rugby World Cup. England cricketer, New Zealand-born Ben Stokes' career is under threat after claims he threw 15 punches in 1 minute. Playboy founder Hugh Hefner dies, and the black cat that came back after 9 years.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. Vanuatu's Prime Minister has ordered the entire population of Ambai to leave the island immediately because of the volcanic threat. Moving 11,000 people to the neighbouring island of Pentecost is expected to take up to a week to complete. Dan McGarry from the Vanuatu Daily Post says most people will be relocated to 2 publicly owned stretches of land on the island.
They'll be travelling by ship. That's the only reasonable way to ferry that number of people involved. In conjunction with this exodus, they will be issuing travel restrictions in the immediate area so that people won't be able to travel into the affected area, and this should facilitate the flow of people.
Dan McGarry in Vanuatu. Methamphetamine with an estimated street value of up to $120 million has been found by police and customs officers disguised as concrete. 7 people have been charged with importing and possessing the Class A drug for supply. Edward Gay reports.
Up to 120 kilograms of methamphetamine was mixed with gypsum and hidden in the base of 16 outdoor umbrella stands. Customs says last month intelligence flagged a 1.4-tonne shipment of swings, slides, a furniture set and garden lights, as well as the umbrella stands. The shipment was linked to a company believed to have been set up for the sole purpose to smuggle drugs. I Tamaki Makoto ko Edward Gaiaho.
The Maori Party says it's not surprised the New Zealand First Leader has dropped a pre-election pledge to hold a referendum on abolishing the Maori seats. Winston signalled the change during an interview that aired on Sky News Australia. He says the Maori Party being voted out of Parliament is behind the change. The Maori Party co-leader Marama Fox says Winston Peters knows that a referendum would have galvanised Maori support for her party.
The seats are still there, so either he doesn't believe that he has to worry about the Labour Party members who sit in those seats because he knows they're all whipped and he'll have to do what they're told, or he just knows that whatever moves he makes against those seats will actually be detrimental to his goal.
Marama Fox. Auckland councillors have agreed in principle to create a dedicated Māori seat, but only if they can get Parliament to change the law. The law change is needed if the Auckland Council is to increase its number of seats from 20. Councillors have rejected the idea of dropping an existing seat to create a Māori ward. Most felt that holding a referendum would be divisive and unsuccessful. The founder of the Playboy empire, Hugh Hefner, has died at his home, the Playboy Mansion, aged 91. Playboy magazine was founded more than 60 years ago, combining images of nude women with in-depth articles, interviews and fiction. Hefner's son Cooper says his father died of natural causes. He described him as a leading voice behind moves towards free speech and sexual freedom. A protester is pledging to stay overnight in a 150-year Norfolk pine tree near Auckland to save it from being cut down. The pine in Snell's Beach was gifted to the area by Governor George Grey and was planted by early settler James Snell. Vavasor Investments had consent to remove it to build 33 new homes at the northern end of the beach. The arborist Charlie Cottrell-Jury, who's been 20 metres up the tree since this morning, says the pine has significant meaning for the community. The Snell's Beach community is rallying around Mr Cottrell-Jury by collecting food and overnight gear for him. A lycra-clad superhero has asked the Christchurch City Council for funding to support his work in the city. Flatman, whose identity is a mystery, made headlines after dropping care packages to students affected by the Christchurch earthquakes almost 7 years ago. He's continued his work since, but is now asking the council for help. Flatman, dressed in a red and black superhero suit, says he wants to create a school program that teaches youth about kindness, generosity and compassion, but he says he's limited by time and money.
So as a council, as business people, as humans, if you have any suggestions to access the funds or know people willing to help, then you know how to reach me. Shine the Flatman signal up in the sky and I'll be there.
Flatman. The Christchurch Mayor, Leanne Dalzell, has asked him to write a report formalising his request. Fire crews are working to put out a cluster of scrub fires lit near Auckland's southwestern motorway this afternoon. Fire Communications Manager Jaron Phillips says it's believed the fires were deliberately lit. He says the fires are under control, but the Transport Authority is warning drivers in the Manukau area to take care because of the smoke. The Black Ferns have brought the Women's Rugby World Cup home to fans in Auckland and revealed they call her Nancy. Noisy fans, most of them girls and young women, gathered to greet the team at the Manukau Stadium. The victorious team won the cup in August, but an official celebration was not held until today. The captain, Fia'ao'o Fa'amausili, says she was overwhelmed with the level of love and support, especially from young players.
When we watch girls play rugby, it sort of puts a smile on our face because it's something that we can give back to these young ones, and it's something that when we're in our rocking chairs later on in life, we can look back and say, look, we've developed, we've had an input on that.
Fia'ao'o Fa'amausili says the cup has been named Nancy after Nancy Wake, the World War II spy, because she was an impressive woman who never gave up. It's 5:05. Sport, big-time golf has come to Auckland, but the golfing public doesn't seem ready. A gallery of close to 1,000 people followed Lydia Ko on her opening round at the New Zealand Women's Open at Windross Farm. But as Matt Chatterton reports, they struggled with some of the finer points of the game.
Lydia Ko is used to large crowds on the LPGA Tour, but the gallery at Windross Farm caught her off guard. Many of those following her were unaware of golfing etiquette, with camera flashes and crowd movement disturbing her several times as she was about to play shots. The 20-year-old Ko, however, refused to put the blame on the galleries for her lacklustre round. She shot at 2 under par 70 and sits 5 shots off the lead, held by England's Jodie Ewart-Shadoff and Canada's Brooke Henderson. At Windross Farm in Auckland, Matt Chatterton.
World Cup celebrations have Black Ferns captain Fia'ao'o Fa'amausili rethinking her plans to retire from international rugby. 36-year-old Fa'amausili brought down the curtain on her 52-test career in the win over England in Belfast. She's still playing provincial rugby and says retirement from the Black Ferns hasn't sunk in, and come next year she may review her decision. The Canterbury Bulldogs have turned to former captain Dean Pay to lead them back to National Rugby League Premiership glory after confirming a 2-year deal for him to be head coach. The Bulldogs had been on the lookout for a new coach since their messy split with Des Hasler 2 weeks ago. That's the news.
Discoveries in Zealandia.
So I can state that very graphically. 34, 35 million years ago, there were crocodiles on Antarctica.
A new type of leader.
Jacinda is willing to share the Prime Ministership, and I think Labour will be Winston's partner.
Saudi Arabian women allowed to drive.
One of the leaders of the campaign said, the kingdom will never be the same after this.
Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, a new push to streamline Trans-Tasman travel. And after 10, we meet the Gas Monkey Garage's Richard Rawlings, star of Fast and Loud, who scars Texas for derelict classic cars to restore and flip. Join me, Lynn Freeman, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to tomorrow midnight. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula fine with the odd shower. A few showers tomorrow, more frequent in the evening. Bay of Plenty, rain easing to a few showers this afternoon, clearing for a time overnight and tomorrow morning. Waitomo to Wellington, including the Central High Country, long fine spells, isolated showers, more frequent for a time tomorrow morning, but drizzle about Kapiti and Wellington. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mostly cloudy, rain north of Wairarapa clearing this evening, becoming mainly fine tomorrow. Bulla to Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain for a time tonight and tomorrow, possibly heavy. For the rest of the South Island, fine today. A few showers spreading north tomorrow, some heavy and possibly thundery with hail for eastern Otago. And the Chatham Islands, rain clearing tomorrow evening. It's exactly 5:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina, and thank you everyone for joining us. Coming up on Checkpoint tonight, an entire island is being evacuated in Vanuatu. Quite a remarkable state of affairs. Winston Peters evacuates his previous position on a referendum on the Maori seats, and Getty the cat comes home after an adventure lasting 9 years. There's something about that story. But we begin tonight with a survey that shows 98% of 272 nurses at the county's Manukau DHB have experienced short staffing, and 93% of those surveyed felt they had reached the limits of safe practice as a result of those staff shortages. Now, last night, Checkpoint revealed voluntary redundancies were about to be offered at the county's Manukau DHB. We've been looking at the pressures on DHBs throughout the country for 2 months now, most particularly at the Southern DHB and the Urology Department at Dunedin Hospital, but not exclusively by any means. Checkpoint believes estimated deficits for the current financial year are now totalling higher than at any time since National became government in 2008 across the country's 20 DHBs combined. Counties Manukau says voluntary redundancies would free resources for redistribution to frontline care. The Association of Salaried Medical Specialists says it's bonkers and yet further evidence of the financial pressure DHBs are under. Today, Checkpoint has obtained a survey done by the New Zealand Nurses Organisation as a direct measure of the pressure their members at the county's Manukau DHB feel under on health's frontline. This includes Middlemore Hospital, of course. And we begin with the first question nurses were asked.
Have you experienced short staffing in your ward or team lately?
272 people answered that question. 267 of them said yes. That's a rate of 98%. I asked a union member who's a nurse at Counties Manukau, have you ever had the experience of feeling like you were short-staffed at work?
I'd like you to find somebody that doesn't feel like that working as a nurse.
And that's exactly what the survey records.
So the sort of messages that were coming through from the survey, and what members were saying, is that they were feeling that they were going home and their job wasn't being done as well as they would like.
That's a union delegate at the CMDHB. The nurses we spoke to today did not want to be named because they love their jobs, but they were adamant they are short-staffed and they are stretched.
And it's nationally that is happening too. I don't think it's just counties. I think that happens on a national basis. There's people are feeling that.
That much is what we've been told and have reported on at length over the past 2 months from other DHBs. But this survey is particular to Counties Manukau, where 98% of 272 nurses have directly described staff shortages. And how did they describe the impact of that? Here's question 2 of the survey.
Do you feel that you have reached the limits of safe practice as a result of an acute staffing shortage?
264 nurses answered that question. 246 of them said yes. That's a rate of 93%. And the question they were answering yes to is whether an acute staffing shortage has led them to the limits of safe practice. Short staffing, full wards. Nurse after nurse describes that.
We are constantly running over 100% occupancy.
That's one nurse. Here's another.
We are often short-staffed. On some shifts, we have more bureau staff working than our rostered nurses.
Despite the DHB's refusal to talk to us, that claim is externally measurable. Checkpoint has obtained the minutes of the DHB's board meeting from the 2nd of August. It contains the Finance and Corporate Business Report for May of this year, and it lists staff costs. Net nursing staff costs are
$2.6 million unfavourable year to date.
Unfavourable. And the first reason listed for this?
Bureau use to cover high acute demand.
Bureau use, that's often temp staff brought in during periods of acute staffing shortages or increased demand. Now, Checkpoint has obtained this material the day after we obtained a letter from the CEO of the county's Manukau DHB indicating an intention to offer a voluntary cessation scheme. Yes, as nurses talk of being short-staffed and the impact of that on patient care, as we reported last night, the DHB is planning to offer voluntary redundancy. This is a verbatim quote.
This scheme offers these staff members an opportunity to request a payment if they cease their employment with Counties Manukau Health.
Today we spoke to doctors and nurses at all levels of Counties DHB. None told us they think voluntary redundancies are the answer. Are the NZNO members at Counties Manukau who you deal with and who you have spoken to feeling under pressure as a result of staff shortages?
Yes, I think many of them are feeling under pressure due to staff shortages.
That was a union delegate at the county's Manukau DHB. So what does county's Manukau DHB say in response to this? What does the ministry say in response to this? And what does the minister say in response to this? None of them were available for an interview. As an aside, the Ministry of Health has consistently not been available for interviews since we started covering these stories 2 months ago. Vanuatu's government has ordered all residents of the island of Auckland to evacuate due to the threat from an erupting volcano. The alert level for the Monaro volcano is a level 4, the second highest level, with the Geohazards Department warning of flying rocks, volcanic gas, acid rain and ash falls. Jenny Meyer from RNZ Pacific reports.
The Prime Minister, Charlo Salwai, says he expects the mass evacuation of up to 11,000 people to begin immediately. Ships being deployed to conduct the evacuations should complete the exercise by the 6th of October. The coordinator for the Vanuatu Red Cross, Dickinson Tivai, says people have been displaced before due to eruptions, but a whole island's populace has never been evacuated.
The whole island itself is not safe. With the way the activity has been ongoing at level 4 until now, so we are just waiting on the Council of Ministers' decision of this morning, and there might be a major change of plans.
The Member of Parliament for Ambai says he's very concerned about people's safety and well-being. Jacob Marta says many people have already left the island, but those who do not want to leave may have no choice. He says there are about 8,000 people remaining on Ambai, and most are in shelters near the seashore, preparing to depart.
Since the eruptions on the last few weeks, probably maybe I can guess about 15 to 20% of populations have already gone. So probably now about 8,000 are still here. And it will probably take them about 3 to 4 days, maybe. It depends on how the operation will go on.
Jacob Marta says the island's volcano has a history of large eruptions, with one in the 1860s causing significant damage. With a new sense of urgency around Monaro, most people will be relocated to public land on the neighbouring island of Pentecost, according to the media director of the Vanuatu Daily Post, Dan McGarry.
They'll be travelling by ship. That's the only reasonable way to ferry that number of people involved. In conjunction with this exodus, they will be issuing travel restrictions in the immediate area so that people won't be able to travel into the affected area, and this should facilitate the flow of people.
Mr McGarry says the Prime Minister has taken the precaution of a compulsory mass evacuation in order to potentially save lives, given the volcano's unpredictability. He says he expects the people of Ambai to be welcomed once they reach Pentecost.
There almost certainly will be welcomed. There are a number of families who actually have ties across both of these islands. You see a lot of common names, and the languages are fairly close to one another. People are extremely accommodating whenever somebody is facing hardship.
The Vanuatu Geohazards rating on the volcano remains on the second highest level of 4 for now. This is Jenny Meyer.
Let's change the subject entirely. Playboy founder Hugh Hefner, who helped usher in the 1960s sexual revolution with his groundbreaking men's magazine and built a business empire around his libertine lifestyle, has died. Playboy Enterprises say he passed away peacefully from natural causes at his Playboy mansion home. He was 91. CNN's Stephanie Ellen has this look back at his life.
He was one of the original American Playboys, a magazine tycoon who helped spark a revolution, one that challenged the nation's views on sexuality.
I have celebrated the romantic connection between the sexes, and that's part of what Playboy is all about.
Hugh M. Hefner, who liked to be called Hef, was born in Chicago in 1926 and raised in what he said was a strict household by conservative Protestant parents.
I felt there was something more to life than the world I saw around me.
In 1953, with just $8,000, the aspiring publisher produced the very first issue of Playboy magazine on the kitchen table of his Chicago apartment. The cover featured a photo of Marilyn Monroe and sold more than 50,000 copies when it hit newsstands in December of 1953. Hefner now had the funds to finance another issue, and the Playboy empire was born.
Well, I have never really thought of Playboy as a sex magazine. What I've tried to do is create a lifestyle magazine for men.
Hefner divorced his wife Mildred Williams in 1959, and during the early days of the magazine's success, decided he would not only promote the fantasy he helped create, but he would live it as well. Audiences got a taste of Hefner's good life in an early 1960s television show called Playboy's Penthouse.
Come on in and meet some of our guests.
Having already established himself in Chicago, Hefner made the move out west. In the early 1970s, when Playboy magazine was selling 7 million copies a month, he made his permanent home at the now famous Playboy Mansion in Los Angeles. In 1989, Hefner uttered the two words many thought he'd never say again when he married Playmate of the Year, Kimberly Conrad.
I do.
The couple had 2 children, but separated in 1998. Hefner said he realized he was much happier as a bachelor.
I am essentially a romantic, so I think my life revolves and always has revolves around women.
Hefner continued to live out the Playboy fantasy even in his later years, often seen in his trademark silk pajamas, surrounded by busty blonde lingerie-clad women while hosting extravagant parties with celebrity guests. He even returned to television in 2005, this time sharing the small screen with 3 live-in girlfriends in the reality show The Girls Next Door. In the late 2000s, he began an on-again, off-again relationship with Playmate Crystal Harris, 60 years his junior. They tied the knot on New Year's Eve in 2012. Hefner sold his beloved Playboy mansion for $100 million in 2016, on the condition that he be allowed to live there for the rest of his life. Playboy and provocateur, Hugh Hefner wanted to make the world a happier, sexier place.
What's your definition of obscenity?
Racism, war, bigotry, but sex itself, no. What a sad and cold world this would be if we weren't sexual beings. I mean, that's the heart of who we are.
And that, of course, was Hugh Hefner ending that report from Stephanie Allen in a statement that his son Cooper Hefner said, "My father lived an exceptional and impactful life as a media and cultural pioneer and a leading voice behind some of the most significant social and cultural movements of our time and advocating free speech, civil rights and sexual freedom." Hugh Hefner has died, aged 91. It's 22 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. The New Zealand First Leader appears to have dropped one of his pre-election pledges, this one to hold a referendum on abolishing the Maori seats, removing a potential obstacle to doing a deal with Labour. Jacinda Ardern, of course, has ruled out a referendum if Labour forms the next government and said it would not be on the table in any coalition talks, particularly after the party made a clean sweep of the 7 Maori seats. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
Just hours after lashing out at media and what Winston Peters said would be his last press conference until after the special votes were counted, he gave an interview to Sky News, which was more enlightening. He said the demise of the Maori Party in the election has put a different spin on his comments prior to the campaign that the Māori electorates had failed to deliver what Māori really need and should be abolished. The New Zealand First Leader promised New Zealand First would hold a mid-term referendum on the seats if it was part of the new government.
The Maori Party itself, which was one of the driving things behind us saying it, the Maori Party itself, a race-based, origin of race party, got smashed in this election and is gone. And so some of the things that, or the elements to the environment in which the promise is made have changed. That's all I can say.
The day after the election, National Leader Bill English refused to rule out the option of a referendum. However, Labour's Jacinda Ardern did rule it out. She has said it would be completely contradictory for Labour to earn the respect of those voters in the 7 Māori seats it won in the election and then work to undermine them. The Māori Party's co-leader, Marama Fox, whose party didn't make it back into Parliament, says Winston Peters' shift in position doesn't surprise her.
Because Winston knows if that had happened, that would have galvanised the Māori nation behind who? Oh, the Māori Party. Now, he said that he doesn't need to have a referendum because the Maori Party's not there, but the seats are still there. So either he doesn't believe that he has to worry about the Labour Party members who sit in those seats because he knows they're all whipped and he'll have to do what they're told, or he just knows that whatever moves he makes against those seats will actually be detrimental to his goal.
Ms Fox says Winston Peters lets his policies be determined by the audience he's standing in front of.
He tells them what they want to hear. And so I think that any moves to remove the treaty out of law, any moves to remove treaty references out of legislation, to revamp the RMA and get rid of the mana whakahonua rohi arrangement will galvanise Māori in this nation to move against him, and that will be a very shaky government.
During the interview, Mr Peters was critical of some aspects of National's policy approach, saying they'd gone down the path of Māori parallel government with a separate sort of social and statutory system. On the Labour Party, he said its view on tax seriously undermined them. Mr Peters was asked what one big thing he would be looking for from the party he chooses to work with.
I wanted to promise that they've got a grasp of economic reality. I think that we're in a very serious international state with respect to the international economy. I think the situation in China is very, very uncertain and unstable in terms of the debt, and I think that not so flash in Australia, our biggest trading partner. And one tremor could have a serious effect on New Zealand. I wished that in this campaign the two old parties had a grasp of what I think is the inevitable correction that's going to take place and how much pain that's going to bring.
It was also put to Mr Peters there was an assumption he would choose to go with National as the party that got the most votes and one that was closer to New Zealand First in policy direction. Mr Peters replied there was an unwritten convention. He would talk first to the party with the most votes.
But they're writing it as some sort of constitutional convention now and throwing the word morality behind it, saying, well, you've got to talk to them and you've got to finish your talks with them. That was not what they were told. That's not what it's been for 21 years. The 21 years it's been, in the first instance, you talk to a political party that had the most votes, but if things were not satisfactorily completed with them, there would be no constraint against you talking to someone else.
Winston Peters says he'll tell the public who he's going with in the next 2 weeks. In the meantime, today it was superannuation that was in Mr Peters' sights as he urged National to apologise to New Zealanders for robbing them of their nest egg by taxing the superannuation fund and halting contributions to it. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
Thanks, Demelza. You will have noticed, of course, that since the election since Saturday, the entire news cycle really has been dominated by one question: what will Winston do? But as yet, nobody's actually been able to answer that. Of course, even asking it when Winston's around is problematic. So we thought we'd change the question. If we were Bill English or Jacinda Ardern, what would we do to sweeten the deal? How would we go about wooing Winston? So Zach Fleming went to find out. And in the absence of an interview with Mr Peters, we thought we'd use some of his responses from yesterday's extraordinary media conference. Take it away, Zach.
What's Winston want?
Why would you ask a question like that?
Less immigration, more benefits for pensioners.
I know you'd like to know the answer, but why on earth would you ask a question like that?
Does he hate Stephen Joyce and Bill English?
It's not true. It's utterly false.
Is he going to go with National or Labour?
Well, anything's possible.
Let's be honest, nobody really knows.
I don't want to get in an argument with you here.
But here at the media, we don't just wildly speculate based on little to no factual information.
I expect the media to catch up.
There are some things that we do know. So here's how to woo Winston.
These are a few of my favourite things.
I've got a bit of a difficult request. I need to buy a present for a man who's going to decide the fate of our country for the next 3 years.
Oh, he'll have to be well dressed, won't he? Come with me. Classic double breasts, big peak lapel, and a subtle check on that as well. Crisp white shirt on him, can't go wrong with that.
Would you match the tie in the handkerchief or the tie in the pocket square?
Do we go red or blue?
What's the next question?
We could make a suit from scratch for him. I'm sure he'd love a bold pinstripe.
Yeah, a bold pinstripe for a bold man.
This is not news of the world, right? Try and step it up here.
Could spend anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 if you like.
You should be, frankly, ashamed of yourselves.
These are a few of my favourite things.
I need a whiskey for a man who might be about to decide the fate / run our country.
Oh, we're talking Winston Peters.
We are.
What you want, baby, I got it.
Winston kind of enjoys a little bit of everything.
Do you know I got it?
1975 are big.
So nearly as old as Winston.
I can't see the sense of holding a press conference. You're going to ask questions like that.
Well, not quite.
Well,
is that the oldest whiskey we've got in the shop?
No, we'd have to go down this way for something like that. Got a 1940 Macallan.
So that actually is older than Winston.
Well, you're not getting a free hit here, mate.
Set you back, wow, a new car, about 35 grand. Hell, if I'm Winston Peters at that stage, that's where my vote's going.
And we all know Mr. Peters loves a good catch in Parliament. He loves to bait fresh MPs.
That's not part and parcel of this discussion.
But he also loves more traditional fishing.
Well, I've heard he loves fishing.
You guys Labour supporters in here?
No.
With the greatest respect, are you serious?
This product here in particular would give any party that wanted to woo him the edge.
Well, I expect some intelligence here.
$400, yeah. All up.
And if you really want to woo Winston, we have it on good authority. His favourite meal is fresh fish and a plate full of greens.
Oh, well, yeah, it gets worse.
Delicate and flaky, that's definitely not Winston.
Well, I'm not going to discuss that.
But here we have the biggest fish in the shop. This is what we need. And obviously, home delivery. Fresh fish and a plate full of greens.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, write about it.
Here with Checkpoint on RNZ coming up, Maori and conservationists stake a claim to access the Northland River by driving through the middle of a dairy farm. The Black Ferns finally received the welcome they deserve after winning the Women's Rugby World Cup. Nona has business, but before all of that, with the time almost about right, 29 minutes to 6. Here's Katrina with the headlines.
The entire population of Ambai in Vanuatu has been ordered to leave the island immediately because of the volcanic threat. Moving everyone to the neighbouring island of Pentecost is expected to take up to a week to complete. Many have already left, but it's estimated about 8,000 people are still on Ambai, and most are in shelters near the seashore preparing to evacuate. More than $100 million worth of methamphetamine disguised as concrete has been found hidden inside umbrella stands. Customs intelligence flagged shipment of swing slides, a furniture set and garden lights, as well as the umbrella stands. They say the shipment is linked to a company believed to have been set up for the sole purpose to smuggle drugs. The Maori Party says it's not surprised the New Zealand First Leader has dropped the pledge to hold a referendum on abolishing the Maori seats. Winston Peters says the Maori Party being voted out of Parliament is behind the change. The party's co-leader Marama Fox says Winston Peters knows that a referendum would have galvanised Maori support for her party. Auckland councillors have agreed in principle to create a dedicated Maori seat, but only if they can get Parliament to change the law. They've rejected the idea of dropping an existing seat to create a Maori ward. Most felt that holding a referendum would be divisive and unsuccessful. The founder of the Playboy empire, Hugh Hefner, has died at 91. Hefner became the unofficial spokesperson for the sexual revolution of the 1960s and 70s and was both lauded and criticised by feminists, with some accusing him of objectifying women, while others said he liberated and empowered them. The Black Ferns have been given a rousing reception in Auckland celebrating their Rugby World Cup win. The captain, Fia O'o Fa'omasili, says they've named the trophy Nancy after Nancy Wake, the World War II spy, because she was an impressive woman who never gave up. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Coming up, an extraordinary interview about North Korea and the United States. But before all of that, Nona Peltier is here in the studio with the latest in business news. Clothing retailer Hallenstein Glasson has had a strong annual result. Its profit up by, what, roughly 25%, was it?
Yeah, more than 26%. Pretty darn good.
What's driving that, Nona?
Well, it was basically picking the right things at the right time to make very strong sales. First half was very strong, stronger than the second half. That was because of winter weather and so on. But look, they made $17.3 million and their sales were up 7%, which is pretty strong. Online online sales up 44%, and they're counting on that continuing because, of course, Amazon is coming into the market, and they're saying they're getting ready. So.
Right.
And that sure was reflected in the share price today. It rose nearly 5%, 15 cents to $3.33 for Hallenstein.
New Zealand Superannuation Fund had a cracker, didn't it?
Yeah, another company, another organisation that's benefiting from those very high share market prices, not just here in New Zealand, but around the world. They made a near 21% return on their investment. And so they drove up the value of the fund to June 30th by $5 billion to $35 billion. That's our pension fund. They even managed to pay the government a tax of $1.2 billion and all of that. And, you know, our share price is holding up compared with the rest. There's been some news out of the United States with the tax reforms that have been introduced. Whether they come off, we don't know. But that sort of put the New Zealand dollar, you would have thought, on the back foot because it raised the US dollar. But no, the New Zealand dollar held steady. At 71.9 US cents, 91.9 Australian, and 53.8 pence. And that was despite the Reserve Bank saying they were going to hold rates steady.
You were excited about that announcement this morning, but nothing happened, right?
Well, nothing happened, but I was still like, well, actually something did happen because for some reason the New Zealand dollar held up. And our market, now I know I said this never really happens, but it's happened again. You know, yesterday we hit a record. Today we ended on the same number because our market was just so ever slightly weaker. We couldn't even register 1 point down. So we're at 7,914 again.
Anna Peltier with the latest in business news. Thank you very much. Maori and conservationists have staked a claim today to access the Northland River by driving through the middle of a dairy farm. And the dairy farm in question just happens to belong to Bill Shepherd, the chairman of the Northland Regional Council. Lois Williams has the story.
It was Fiona Farrell of Swamp Kauri fame who realised there was public and Maori reserve land on either side of what was once Northland's loveliest river, the Wairua. The president of the Northland Environmental Protection Society was poring over new maps released by the Walking Access Commission. She'd tried in the past to walk to the Wairua Rapids and been stopped by locked farm gates. But then she spotted a paper road that ran from Rapids Road through a farm and down towards Crown Land and an old Māori eeling reserve. She started writing to the Auckland Council to make the case for formal public access.
It should be public and it should be used, and it gives the only access, public access to this river, to the waterfalls and to the rapids. Kayakers and the young of New Zealand who are into adventure sports would love it. Our rapids are well known. They were commented on in writings by Zane Grey as being beautiful.
Ms Farrell also called Northland's river campaigner Milan Luka to tell him about the paper road. They drove to the farm and found the road had been formed into a race, winding past farm buildings and the milking shed. Fiona Farrell says they produced maps showing the road was public land, but the farm manager turned them away. Bill Shepherd, the Regional Council Chair who owns the farm, says he's given plenty of people access to the river in his 35 years on the farm, but he says his manager was taken aback by the sudden demand for access and worried about health and safety laws.
You know, if you get a driver that's not experienced handling livestock, ending up in the middle of a herd of 500 cows coming along the race, could be hugely disruptive.
For the past 2 months, Fiona Farrell, Milan Luka, the Walking Access Commission, the Auckland Council and Bill Shepherd have been trying to negotiate a deal to formalise public access over the farm without disrupting it or endangering anyone. And they just about reached agreement. But local hapu and the conservation group are fed up with delays. They piled into a couple of four-wheel drives today for Hikoi via the paper road to the river. There was a quick stop to assure the manager of their peaceful intent, and then it was off on foot for the last stretch over pasture pugged by the dairy herd and boggy enough to suck off your gumboots.
Ah! I'm stuck. I can't get my boot out of this. Oh, yeah, got it. I wouldn't call this accessible, Milan.
There's nowhere to walk.
On the riverbank where his ancestors used to camp and wait for the eels to come down the river in autumn, Milan Ruka eyes the muddy brown flow and chokes up a little. He says all over the country, Māori and Pākehā have been shut out of river places like this through land development.
It's actually quite significant because I could almost guarantee you probably haven't seen this gathering here for 50 years of this many people. And there's only a dozen of us or so. It really is significant. and it's symbolic to let the landowners know that it's essential to regain our presence in such places.
Bill Shepherd says when he gets back from holiday in Australia, he'll be putting up signs to let people know they can access the Wairua River through his farm. But he says if they want a road fit for vehicles, the council will have to pay for it. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
Tortured beyond belief. That's how US President Donald Trump summed up the treatment of Otto Warmbier as he accused the North Korean regime for the first time of torturing the American student. The 22-year-old died in June, just days after being released from a North Korean prison where he'd been held for 17 months. Now, US diplomat Evans Revere counselled Otto Warmbier's family for over a year after he was detained in North Korea. Whilst he absolutely despairs of what happened to Otto, Evans feels deeply for the family. He's also worried about the escalation of rhetoric attached to the US response. So I asked Evans Revere what difference the family's interview and Donald Trump's response to it has made to an already volatile diplomatic situation.
The information that came out was very disturbing. It confirmed some of my worst suspicions. As you may know, I worked closely with the family for a long time and had more than an inkling of the maltreatment of this young man. And for his father to finally come out and say what he did in as specific and as revealing a fashion as he did was very upsetting to me, and I know it's upsetting to many other people. It remains to be seen what the ultimate impact of this will be on this unfolding crisis, but quite frankly, it will not be a positive development if you get my drift.
Absolutely.
This will push emotional buttons among many, many Americans, and you've no doubt already seen that President Trump did not waste any time as they were on television tweeting his own assessment of this, which was rather definitive, that young Otto Warmbier was tortured in manner beyond belief. And so that will echo and resonate, I think, with a lot of Americans. To be very frank with you, I've been personally convinced that this young man was physically abused while he was in North Korean hands, and now we have the family coming out and providing some details as to what happened, and it's all very disturbing and upsetting.
Really disturbing and upsetting and heartbreaking for Otto's mum and dad, and yet yes. It also plays to the heightening of the narratives, the heightening of the standoff. Now, this isn't me being unsympathetic, and this isn't me being glib or dismissive of the appalling mistreatment of Otto Warmbier, who was a young man on an adventure and looks like he was trying to souvenir something, as people his age have done since we first started travelling. But the rhetoric is now so heightened and so visceral that where do the United States and North Korea possibly go from here?
Well, you've actually understated the problem, because not only has the rhetoric been heightened and intensified and become more volatile and vociferous, it's become very personal. You have two leaders, the two primary actors in this drama or tragedy, who are addressing each other in the international media in pretty hostile terms, very hostile terms, in a way that's really unprecedented in the history of U.S.-North Korea relations. Over the years, it's usually been the North Korean side that's engaged in this over-the-top rhetorical bombast. And Americans, especially experts on North Korea, have taken it all in stride, because we've heard this before, and we've been able to separate North Korean rhetoric from the reality of what North Korea can do. But now we have a North Korea that is not only continuing to engage in this rhetorical overkill, but actually has the ability to do some of the things that it is threatening to do. And then on top of that, we have the American president, who is engaging personally in attacks on the North Korean leader And it's been reported in the American press that he's done this against the advice of many of his key advisors. And for those who know something about North Korea, there's probably nothing more likely to elicit a strong and violent response from the North Koreans than attacking their leadership. They are compelled to respond. They are compelled to respond in the strongest way, and they have done precisely that. So now you have two leaders, each attacking the other, each of them probably unable to back down because of reasons of face. And then getting back to your question, where do we go from here? It's very difficult for these two leaders to back down without losing face. And so I don't have an easy answer to your question, but let us hope that there are wise people and wise counselors in both capitals that can suggest some mechanism that would enable the two sides to de-escalate. I don't know what that is, some sort of symbolic action that one side or the other could take, or some quiet channel that could be established between the two capitals in which there could be agreement to stand down. But something is going to need to happen at this point, because we've gone very, very far down this rhetorical path. The two leaders are now personally engaged in this mudslinging match against each other, using the worst possible language. And that is not a healthy situation to be in. And as an American, I'm particularly concerned because we normally have not played this game in the past. We've left it to the North Koreans to engage in these excesses, and we've stayed out of it. We've stayed above it, which is where we should be. But here we are.
You talked about wise counsel in the capital, and we all know about the kind of tensions that are existing in Washington at the moment, but you have a real insight into Pyongyang. And can you explain, does Kim Jongun at any stage welcome wise counsel? So his rhetoric is bellicose, he is almost a caricature, but are there people beneath him who are talking to Washington, who are having meetings with American officials and saying, ignore the rhetoric, actually we can do deals, or do they not exist, those people?
Well, you could say that a number of the people who might have performed that role are no longer with us. Some of the senior officials and military people and others who've been executed by this leader. One likes to think that every government, irrespective of its politics, irrespective of its ideology, has people that can approach the leader and present a different view. But keep in mind that, first of all, the North Koreans who meet with Americans are almost exclusively foreign ministry officials. The foreign ministry in North Korea traditionally has not been the major player on these issues. They've been a player, but not the major player. The foreign minister himself is probably extremely well connected and respected by the leader, but the rest of the ministry, those who are often meeting with Americans, are somewhat out of the loop, as we like to say, in terms of their ability to really have an impact on the leader. That being said, my experience with North Korea, which goes back a few years, tells me that their leadership and their leader, they have channels, they have ways of getting information from the field, getting information through their system that gives them a picture of what the United States is thinking and what it may be considering doing. But the problem in the North Korean system is that this information goes through so many filters that are almost intentionally designed to distort it, because you don't want to tell the leader what he doesn't want to hear. And I've had personal encounters with the North Koreans over the years in which I have said things to them, and one can see the physical reaction when you say these things, because they will have to report these things, and in reporting them, they could get themselves in trouble. So what I've done over the years, and I started doing this as a diplomat, is to put it down on a piece of paper. for them so that they can transmit this piece of paper back to the Home Office, eventually up to the eyes of the leader. And they will not be responsible for its content. And they can say, well, this is a paper that the Americans gave us. Because if they try to analyze things and put their own analysis forward to the leader, they are putting themselves at some risk.
What an extraordinary state of affairs. That's Evans Revere, who was talking to us earlier this afternoon. It's 11 to 6. The Black Ferns have finally had the welcome they deserve as winners of the Women's Rugby World Cup. Hundreds of fans, mostly young women and girls, turned out to a noisy, inspiring and sometimes very funny welcome at the Vodafone Events Centre in Manukau. They were rewarded for their efforts by being able to hold aloft the cup, or as the team calls her, Nancy. Rowan Quinn was there.
The moment their heroes arrive, the Black Ferns run through a guard of honour of primary school kids and talented secondary school players. Among them was the hooker Te Kura Ngata Airingamati.
I felt like a pop star coming into the stadium and everyone shouting at us. It was so awesome.
The welcome home's been a long time coming. Most of these women aren't professionals and came back from their trip to get stuck back into their other lives. But today was the chance to feel the love, something the captain, Fia O'Wha'amausili, appreciated.
Well, I'm still quite overwhelmed. This is amazing. Look at everyone here today to come and support our team. It's something that we love to do. We love to sing, we love to dance, and we just love to smile.
She says it's been great to bring, quote, this bad girl home, referring to the cup they call Nancy, after the New Zealand-born World War II spy Nancy Wake.
She was determined, she loved what she did, she proved everybody wrong, and a female with a lot of power and had a lot of odds against her but turned them into positives.
The humour and warmth in the team was evident as they spoke on stage, often teasing each other, and they revealed they had a team within a team, the Band Ferns, the pick of the squad's singers. They sang a cheeky song penned to tease Wha'amausili for sometimes muddling her words.
Why is that? Why are you talking like that? Teach us a bit of that. I'm not trendy on the mainstream.
Team funny girl Victoria Sabritsky Natafali says humour is a big part of team culture.
It's like that all the time. We probably have our ups and downs like sisters do, you know. We can't all be happy families, but we love it. We suck it up and we just keep going.
Then the Ferns were treated to a performance themselves, honoured with a haka from Auckland Girls Grammar. And it was schoolgirls and young women who were the biggest fans, like Emeleta Oloa.
So we're from Southern Cross campus, and we're the Auckland champs for girls first 15s union in Auckland. We're just inspired by the girls, and it's an honour to actually be in the same room as them, the same stadium, which is pretty cool.
And these boys, Fap, Philly and Lester, showed it wasn't just girls who looked up to them.
I like how they work together, and I like how they're communicating and talking.
And if something goes wrong, they don't moan about it, they say keep your head up and carry on.
A far cry from the heavily managed All Black events, today Black Ferns fans could easily get up close and personal with their idols and even hold the World Cup. A long line snaked around for autographs, with the youngest player in the team, Aotearoa Mata'u, enjoying talking to fans.
The atmosphere has been extraordinary, it's been fun, and this is all kind of new to us, signing and stuff like that, so it's real exciting.
Fia O'Wha'amausili says she'd love to see women's rugby build on all the interest and is urging the Rugby Union to schedule more games each year. The policewoman, who's won 4 World Cups and played more than 50 tests, is retiring on a high note to concentrate on her work. But she says if she gets itchy feet next year, the boots might come back on. I tāmaki Makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
What a delightful story, Rowan. A Wellington family whose cat was run over and killed was shocked to get a call over the weekend from the vet telling them to come and get their cat because it was alive. The Maori family were distraught when Getty went missing almost a decade ago. They replaced her, but that cat got run over a few months ago and the family vowed not to get another. That was until Dad, Paul, got a phone call on Saturday.
We were like, well, our cat's
not alive. Basically,
I'm sorry for laughing.
Our cat's dead. We don't really want a zombie cat. What cat do you have? And it was absolute shock when they said Getty, and we were like, Getty? Getty's like, we lost Getty nearly 9 years, or just over 9 years ago, and yeah, it was just absolute shock, and I'm still in disbelief and shock. It's crazy. These things don't happen very often, and when they do, it is a complete shock.
It's such a delightful story, except for the poor cat that died. So you lost Getty, you looked for Getty for a while, then you got another cat, and that cat died a few months ago, right? Yes.
So he got hit by a car, and it was we decided not to get another cat.
Yeah.
And because it's a bit traumatic, and we chose not to get a new cat. But technically, this isn't a new cat.
No, it's not.
So it's okay, and the kids get it. The kids are 9 and 7. They get it. They love the idea of having another animal. They're really animal kids. So yeah, it has worked out.
Of course, Getty has been gone for longer than your children have been around, or certainly in the case of the oldest child, been sentient, right? So they wouldn't have known Getty, they would have known of Getty, right, but would never have met her.
Correct. Yeah, so they weren't around. My wife, Sandra, was pregnant with Alex when Getty ran away. So yeah, so the kids had never seen Getty, and also being found 2 kilometres from where we used to live is quite strange. And because I like to run, I did quite a lot of runs for many weeks around Beremport, different streets I wouldn't normally run, and try to keep a lookout essentially, and nothing. So for 9 years later is like a pure and utter surprise.
And what sort of difference is there in Getty's physical, Nick? Obviously, she was a much-loved domestic cat when she disappeared, so is she not quite as well-kept now?
Well, she's the vet said if you put on a scale of 1 being anorexic, 10 being obese, 5 being normal, she's about 2.5. So she's a bit skinny. She was definitely flea-ridden and worm-ridden and things like that, so we've dealt with that. She's got very little teeth. And part of that is just from living rough. And she's also got discoloration in her fur, so a lot of sun bleaching. So we're doing lots of brushing, and that's helping. Lots of cuddles are helping as well. And the vet just said to don't scare her in any way, don't stress her out. So so we're doing what we can.
So do you think she's been feral for 9 years?
I'm pretty sure she's been befriended by people along the way. The vet was pretty adamant that the teeth have gone due to, ripping into garbage or food or eating, rodents, birds, things like that. So he's adamant that that happens. It's quite well known from wild cats to have that issue. So he was pretty certain that there's been a majority of those 9 years.
And do you think, and we were trying to second guess a cat here, and as a cat owner, I know that that's absolutely impossible to do. But do you think she remembers you?
No idea. All I can take is what's happened. So we'll say Getty, and she'll turn her head, and then she'll pop down off the couch, come towards you. She'll sit on my lap she's slept on my lap for a couple of hours, 2 times. So you can only take what you get, basically, and say, well, you hope so that she's not distraught and feels like she's in a strange place. The kids like the idea, and social media like the idea that she may remember us, but I don't know. I think I'd like to think so, but the reality is, I don't know. Well,
what you do know is if she's unhappy, she's going to go, right? So the fact she's staying, the fact she's sitting on your lap is, at the very least, a vote of faith in you, isn't it?
It is, and it's a good indication, I would gather.
Yeah. And so how old do you reckon Getty is now, roughly?
So that was my number one question that I said to the vet, taking in consideration being being wild for some time. So she was about 2 when she left. So it was about nine years. So about 11. But taking into consideration living wild, the vet's adamant that she's probably around her health puts her at around 14, 15 years old.
Right, so that's getting,
yeah.
So that's getting to the end of a cat's life, isn't it? Heading towards it.
Yeah, so we're going to make the most of it. We're going to spoil her a bit with some treats, and we're definitely going to make sure she's okay. But yeah, it's definitely our cat. Well, we realised straight away when we saw her that she had the same face and everything. It's amazing what you can remember after 9 years.
It's Andrew Maybe, who is Getty's human dad. I guess 30 seconds before 6, less now after I made such a hash of that. Just a reminder, the Silver Scrolls are on in Dunedin tonight. 5 great finalists for the Song of the Year and also the Clean being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Rather special stuff happening before that. Richard Langston, who is really the first journalist to write about Flying Nun, is on with Brian Crump, and then the show itself is live on RNZ, and I think it could be magic.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. The MP for Ambai in Vanuatu says many people have already left the island because of the volcanic threat, but there are some people who don't want to leave. The Prime Minister has ordered the immediate evacuation of all 11,000 residents of the island. The MP, Jacob Mata, says there are about 8,000 people still on Ambai and most are in shelters near the seashore preparing to evacuate.
Since the eruptions on the last few weeks, probably maybe I can guess about 15 to 20% of populations have already gone. So probably now about 8,000 are still here. And it will probably take them about 3 to 4 days, maybe. It depends on how the operations will go on. Jacob
Mata. The Auckland Council is to get a dedicated Maori seat, but only if the government agrees to a law change. Councillors have voted 2-1 in principle to have the seat, but say the number of councillors must be increased from 20. Our Auckland correspondent Todd Nile reports.
A Maori seat on the country's biggest local body is only partly won. Auckland is the only council with special legislation capping its number of seats at 20, and council insists the Maori seat must be an addition. They've steered away from alternatives such as creating a seat for the next local body elections or to hold a referendum on the move. The Mayor, Phil Goff, says a referendum would be divisive and unlikely to approve the seat. Manukau Ward Councillor Al Filipaina, who's part Maori, proposed the compromise of the law change and says the outcome is a victory for Maori. In Auckland, Todd Nile.
98% of nurses at the county's Manukau District Health Board say they have experienced short staffing and 93% say they had reached the limit of safe practice. The survey was carried out by the New Zealand Nurses Organisation. A union member told Checkpoint nurses believed their job was not being done as well as they would have liked. Nurses say the nursing shortage is a nationwide problem and not limited to counties Manukau. The Playboy founder, Hugh Hefner, has died at the Playboy Mansion in California of natural causes. He was 91. The BBC's Natasha Goodenberg looks back on his life.
Hugh Hefner was called the godfather of the sexual revolution, sporting silk pyjamas in the daytime and surrounding himself with beautiful women. He rejected his strict Methodist upbringing and shook up 50s America with what he described as a lifestyle magazine. With Marilyn Monroe as the first centerfold, Playboy was an instant success, and during its heyday there were regular contributions from writers such as Norman Mailer and Kingsley Amis. Playboy's fortunes dipped in the 80s, and Hefner himself suffered a stroke. But he and his publishing empire bounced back, and into his 80s, Hef was still living out his adolescent dreams at the Playboy Mansion in Hollywood.
Natasha Goodenberg. The Westland Mayor says moving Franz Josef to protect it against earthquakes could be unaffordable. A draft report commissioned by the West Coast Regional Council found that moving Franz Josef could be an option to protect the town from the volatile alpine fault. The tourist town has about 300 residents but has more than 500,000 visitors a year. As well as relocation, the other options are protection measures or doing nothing. The Westland Mayor, Bruce Smith, says moving the entire town could cost up to $1 billion, and that couldn't be covered by ratepayers. The Christchurch City Council's chosen a name for its new $92 million library, but won't include the word library. The council voted to call the building, located beside the ruined Christchurch Cathedral, Tūranga. The council unanimously decided to accept the name today, but didn't decide if any English words would accompany the name. Councillor Jani Johansson says he cannot accept a public library that doesn't have the word library in its name.
I can't accept that when we're going to have a public library built in the city that doesn't have library on the outside of it. Is there any reason why we couldn't just have like Tūranga and then library underneath or next to it?
Jani Johansson, Tūranga is expected to open next year. An Australian health blogger who falsely claimed to have cancer has been fined more than $410,000. The federal court in Melbourne has found that wellness blogger Belle Gibson misled her readers when she claimed to have cured her cancer through alternative therapies and diets. It was later revealed she never had the disease. Ms. Gibson made almost $500,000 after building a social media empire and releasing the Whole Pantry cookbook and app based on the claims. The court also heard she made false claims about donating a large part of her profits to charities. It's 6:05. The Highlanders winger Waisake Naholo will play his first test since suffering concussion against the British and Irish Lions in July. Naholo's been named on the right wing for Sunday morning's test against Argentina in Buenos Aires, replacing Nehi Milner-Skudder. The Crusaders' back, David Havili, will make his test debut in the reserves. Damien McKenzie remains at fullback. In the forwards, locks Luke Romano and Scott Barrett get rare starts with Vaya Fafita at blindside flanker and Matt Todd on the open side. Lydia Ko was 5 shots off the lead after her opening round at the New Zealand Women's Golf Open in Auckland. The world number 8 had a 2-under par first round of 70. The former England cricket captain David Gower has backed the decision to select all-rounder Ben Stokes for the Ashes series, despite a video allegedly showing him involved in a street fight. The New Zealand-born Stokes was arrested earlier this week but released without charge as police investigate the incident. Gower says England can't afford to tour without him.
Ben has matured a lot, believe it or not, over the last 2 or 3 years. And we thought he was making all the right steps in all the right directions, both as a player and as an ambassador. This incident is a setback. No one's going to deny that. But you want Ben Stokes on that tour. He is the sort of character who basically inspires a side.
Former England cricket captain David Gower. That's the news.
The Silver Scrolls are New Zealand's most prestigious songwriting awards, and they're on tonight in Dunedin. Past winners include Lord, Don McGlashan, Beck Runga, Dave Dobbin and Greg Johnson. I'm Jesse Mulligan. I'll be hosting tonight's ceremony, and RNZ will be streaming it live, on air and online. Tonight from 6:30 p.m. on RNZ National, Brian Crump and Richard Langston bring you a pre-ceremony guided tour of Dunedin's music, culture, people and places. Then from 8 you can watch the event at rnz.co.nz/music or on Freeview Channel 50. There'll be surprise performances from top New Zealand musicians, and you'll find out who's won at the same time they do. The 2017 APRA Silver Scrolls, live on RNZ National from 6:30 p.m. tonight. Then from 8, watch live at rnz.co.nz/music or on Freeview Channel 50.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula fine with the odd shower. A few showers tomorrow with more frequent in the evening. Bay of Plenty rain easing to a few showers this afternoon, clearing for a time overnight and tomorrow morning. Waitomo to Wellington, including the central high country, long fine spells, isolated showers, more frequent for a time tomorrow morning, but drizzle about Kapiti and Wellington. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mostly cloudy, rain north of Wairarapa clearing this evening, becoming mainly fine tomorrow. Bulla to Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain for a time tonight and tomorrow, possibly heavy. For the rest of the South Island, fine today, a few showers spreading north tomorrow, some heavy and possibly thundery with hail for eastern Otago. And the Chatham Islands rain clearing tomorrow evening. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. A survey obtained by Checkpoint has revealed 98% of 272 nurses at the county's Manukau DHB have experienced short staffing. The survey undertaken by the New Zealand Nurses Organisation revealed 93% felt they had, and I'm quoting here, reached the limits of safe practice as a result of those staff shortages. It comes after this program revealed last night that voluntary redundancies were about to be offered at the county's Manukau DHB. County's Manukau says voluntary redundancies would free resources for redistribution to frontline care. This would include Middlemore Hospital. We invited the Ministry of Health, the DHB itself and the Health Minister on the program tonight. None of them were available. The Ministry of Health is consistently not available and has consistently not been available throughout our 2 months of looking at DHBs and their fiscal positions. New Zealand First doesn't currently have a health spokesperson. Julianne Genter is the Green Party's health spokesperson, and she joins us on the phone now. Are you there?
Kia ora.
Kia ora, nice to talk to you. You also had the experience of going out to Middlemore and taking the photo that was widely circulated on social media saying essentially the hospital was full, right?
Yes, that was probably about a month ago now. I heard from a regular volunteer who volunteers at Middlemore Hospital that they were taking the unusual step of removing couches and chairs from some rooms to create new space to deal with patients. And this wasn't just the emergency department that was doing it, and that there was a sign out the front saying the hospital was full. And of course, once I shared that on social media, other people came forward with stories saying they'd seen that sign before in the previous few months. So it wasn't a new thing.
OK, so we now have a survey of nurses who have participated in it, who are members of the union. Of 272 who answered this question, 267 said they had experienced short staffing in the ward or as a team, and then 246 of them said they felt they had reached the limits of safe practice as a result of staffing shortages. Is that good enough?
Absolutely not. I think it's outrageous and very concerning, but it's also consistent with what I have heard from people across the sector over the last year. And of course, it completely contradicts what Minister of Health, National Party Minister of Health, Jonathan Coleman has been saying, which is there's no problem with underfunding of the health system.
So you're suggesting, and certainly people have been telling us the same thing, this is not unique. These kind of pressures, this kind of survey response is not unique to Counties Manukau.
That's what I've heard. Now, Counties Manukau might be in the worst situation. I mean, it's a very high-risk population, high-need population, and of course Auckland has experienced a lot of population growth in the last few years, which has not been met, I think, by a commensurate increase in funding for health services. But I think you'd probably get a similar response at Auckland Hospital and other hospitals around the country.
What needs to happen?
Well, I think we need a new government, but we also need a change. And I think this is the logical result of an ideological approach, which says we're going to ask people to do more with less. And there's only so long you can squeeze down on the people who are providing health services and ask them to perform their duties until the whole thing starts falling apart.
Julianne Genter, who's the Green Party health spokesperson, joining us live on the phone. The Minister, the Ministry and the DHB were not available. It's 12 minutes past 6. Vanuatu authorities have ordered the entire population of Wombai to leave the island immediately because of the volcanic threat. Moving 11,000 people to the neighbouring island of Pentecost is expected to take a week to complete. Dan McGarry from the Vanuatu Daily Post is on the line now. Dan, we're delighted to have you with us. Thank you so much. Can you talk about the logistics of getting 11,000 people off an island?
It's a pretty daunting prospect in a country of a little less than 300,000 total population. We are very limited in the resources that we can bring to bear. As you can imagine, air transport is just it's a non-starter in this kind of scenario. So we're stuck with maritime solutions. Happily, the transit distance between Wombai and Pentecost is not terribly far. Even with a very slow-moving inter-island barge, you're talking about a transit period of about 3 to 4 hours. So we will be able to manage fairly decent volumes of people, but each of these barges can take at most maybe 200 people. So there's going to be a lot of time taken to get the barges up there to the island. And it's going to take a lot of time to get everybody moved off. And then once we have them moved off, of course, we face additional challenges of supporting very large concentrations of population in a very small place.
Are there any people who are simply reluctant to leave, who just say, no, we're going to stay here?
Quite the opposite, actually. There have been very few holdouts, but very, very few. Almost not enough to mention. I heard a mention of one old man who had just finished building a house. He was very proud of it, didn't want to go. The very next morning he showed up once he'd seen the activity. So most people are convinced that the best course is to leave the island. The evacuations, I should say, have begun already. We'll be running photos in tomorrow's newspaper of children being brought onto the ships. We're doing a staged evacuation. The people most vulnerable will be taken away first. So far, the entire process has been well managed using only local resources. But once we get to the longer-term implications of this evacuation, it's almost certain that Vanuatu will not be able to go it alone.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they're forced to stay on Pentecost and be off on by for a long period of time, then you really are going to need the assistance of NGOs and foreign governments, aren't you?
It's almost certain. The problem with this kind of crisis is that it is completely open-ended. Yeah. It's impossible to predict how a volcano is going to behave and for how long, we're going to have to sustain this population. I was just on the phone with the New Zealand High Commission here only moments before you called me. They assured me that they have, even though they haven't received a formal request for assistance yet, they're already beginning to prepare themselves to offer help.
Dan McGarry from the Vanuatu Daily Post, thank you so much for joining us, Dan. We really appreciate it. As Dan was describing, the entire population of that island, 11,000 people, bit by bit, about 200 people at a time on that car ferry being evacuated to the island of Pentecost, about 3 to 4 hours sail away. A Save Mart worker whose job has been saved despite being a union member says she and other staff will continue to fight for health and safety in the workplace. Now, the workers came to Checkpoint 2 or 3 weeks ago concerned their health and safety was being compromised because they couldn't wear gloves when sorting through items dumped in the blue Child Cancer Foundation bins. Actually, they're Save Mart bins with Child Cancer Foundation stickers on the side. The workers said soiled clothing, rubbish, dirty nappies, broken glass, even dead animals and needles used for drug injection were dumped in the bins, and they were not allowed to wear gloves. The Newland worker, whose redundancy has been withdrawn now by clothing recycling boss Tom Doonan, says things are starting to change, but there could still be improvements.
We had a union meeting with our rep, Graham McKean, and we came to a decision as a group that, we're happy to go for a collective bargaining agreement for better working conditions in regards to health and safety, safe environment to the entire Save Mart company in New Zealand, and, just staff members being treated with dignity and respect and a better wage as well. That's also on the card.
OK, so first of all, you were told you were being made redundant. You are now not being made redundant. That's a statement of fact, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's good news, wonderful news, because jobs are important, but there are still issues around health and safety you want to address.
Yes, it's an ongoing issue. I mean, there has been slight improvements in the job at New Lynn. We're starting to see that there's improvements happening, which is good. It's a positive outcome.
So what sort of improvements are happening? Of course, the big issue that we discussed with you and lots of staff is that you were sorting without gloves. Do you have gloves now?
Yes, we have gloves now. So we have that option of wearing gloves, whereas we were never given that option before.
OK, so you've got your jobs back, you've got gloves. What else would you like?
I think with us, there's a lot of issues in regards to the health and safety. It's taken a little bit longer. I'm not too sure what the time frame it is for everyone to agree that it's up to A grade, but it's mainly just to do with the health and safety for now. That's the most important thing for all of us.
Do you think that you would be in the position of getting gloves and getting your job back had you not spoken out?
No. I don't think so. I mean, we've got an amazing outpouring public support. If it wasn't for them, they're 100% behind us. They believe in us. They believe in our principles and our values. That's what we did it for. It was just the way we were treated at work. It was unnecessary.
Yeah. How did the public express that support? How were you hearing from people?
Well, it's all over social media, thanks to you, John Campbell, Radio New Zealand, and Pip. It's just amazing. You know, we've got an amazing Fresh Union team. They believe in us. You know, it's a story that should have been told years ago, and it's unfortunate that past members and present members had to suffer whatever amount of years they've worked within the company, you know, for it to come out. It shouldn't have had to be that way. Health and safety is important for every New Zealander. You know, they hear our voices, we hear theirs as well.
Are other SafeMart staff members joining the union now?
Well, we'd hope that people would be joining the union. You know, that was another goal of ours. That's what we're hoping to get more members, you know. But it's still the same amount that we have now.
When you see Tom now, the owner, who's never appeared on Checkpoint, and denied a lot of what we were saying, how is it? How are you getting along, all of you?
Oh, it just goes in the ear, out the other. You know, it's like, well, the public is telling it themselves. So there's got to be some kind of truth in what we're saying. People don't just come out for nothing, and we wouldn't have done this for nothing. That's not what we're about. It's based on our principles and values of what we wanted, and the public is speaking pretty much for us as well, of everything.
And how are you feeling? Do you want to stay on at SafeMart? Would you like to stay there if you can get the health and safety conditions sorted?
For sure. You know, we don't want to leave until we're done. You know, we can't just think of ourselves. We've got to think of everybody else out there. It's not just our company. There'll be other companies that'll be similar. You know, we're just a voice for them. You know, we'd like to stay on and to complete all that we've done, that we're trying to do, you know, to get it out there that health and safety is important for everyone in New Zealand.
It's a SafeMart worker who is indeed staying on as a SafeMart worker. Lots of feedback coming in tonight on our lead story that we began the program with and returned to after 6 o'clock about a survey into short staffing at the county's Manukau DHB, although of course this is a broader issue as we have been reporting on for a couple of months now. I'm a registered nurse working in an operating theatre in another DHB. Our theatres are understaffed to the extent that nurses are working outside the MECA recommendations. Management tell us to manage our time better, work smarter. How can you do this when you're working in the business of caring for unwell children and adults? Nursing is always the area where DHBs try to save money. Nurses always work hard because they care about people and they are the front line. John, this issue with short nurse staffing is across all DHBs, while in the meantime bureaucracy, management and administrative just keep increasing. It is all out of control. The DHBs need to be reined in and controlled, says Lynn, another nurse. I know a senior midwife who's trying to cover the work of 3 positions, 3 nurses who've walked away from jobs at Starship. Think you'll find that the health department is in disarray due to lack of funding and neglect, and the ignorant and naive electorate hasn't re-elected these bastards. Thank you. Please don't bury this shocking nursing issue, John. I'm a national supporter, but I hate what is happening in our New Zealand health system, especially in our public hospital. It's a disgrace. We need this exposed and fixed. Thank you for addressing this tonight. We appreciate your feedback. It's 22 minutes past 6. Footage has emerged today of an incident involving the England cricketer Ben Stokes just before he was arrested outside a nightclub this week. The New Zealand-born all-rounder, he only gets called a New Zealand-born all-rounder when he's done really well or really naughtily, as in this case, was held on suspicion of causing bodily harm. He was released without charge but remains under investigation. He now has a fractured finger but has been picked to play the Ashes series in Australia and will keep his position as the England team vice-captain. The ABC's James Glenday has more from London.
The appeal from he caught behind his appeal for a catch and he's given out.
When England took on the West Indies in a one-day match at the Oval in London in the early hours of this morning, they were without one of their most dangerous players. Ben Stokes was out injured after an off-field incident that's made him the subject of a criminal and internal disciplinary investigation, much to the disappointment of Andrew Strauss, England's Director of Cricket.
It is never a good thing to have to deal with these situations, for me to be in front of a TV camera, for the guys to have to go out and play and perform with things like this hanging over their heads. So, we do need to ask ourselves some questions.
Stokes was outside a nightclub in Bristol with fellow player Alex Hales when an incident took place. Afterwards, a 27-year-old man required hospital treatment for facial injuries. The incident overshadowed the much-anticipated announcement of England's Ashes team. Stokes, who is probably the side's form player, was included in that squad. Former England captain David Gower says selectors have no one else to replace him with.
You want Ben Stokes on that tour. He is the sort of character who basically inspires the side. He's your pivot.
But Stokes has a checkered past. He was sent home from a tour in 2013 for late-night drinking, while in 2014 he missed the World T20 after punching a dressing room locker and breaking his hand. England commentators, like former star batsman Michael Vaughan, expect Stokes to be taunted by fans down under and say he must change his ways if he's to survive at the top level.
The situation that Ben Stokes has put the England side is one that's very, very difficult. You know, today the Ashes announcement of the squad. You're looking at an injury now to his right hand. Will he be able to play in any of the warm-up games? Probably not. So the actual warm-up and the build-up to the Ashes has already been affected. What's going to go on with the aspect he's been arrested? Will he have that against him for the next few weeks? There's issues with the side. They're not too sure what their best team is. There's now issues with their best player. Everything that could possibly go wrong leading into an Ashes series is pretty much up there.
Like good all-rounders Ian Botham and Andrew Flintoff before him, England may have to spend more time managing Stokes' personality and off-field antics than honing his on-field cricketing talents.
Coming up to 6:25, it's still 3 months to Christmas, but the Defence Force is already gearing up for the festive season. Soldiers, Navy and Air Force personnel join forces today with the RSA, Return Services Association, staff from Foodstuffs and Z Energy and school kids to pack Christmas parcels for about 300 personnel on overseas deployments. Ruth Hill checked out the operation in Upper Hutt this morning.
We're in a community hall just across the road from Trentham Military Camp. About 50 people are standing at trestle tables arranged in a rectangular production line. The RSA has been doing this for 76 Christmases now, dating back to World War II. As you would expect, things are being organised with military precision. Directing operations is the welfare coordinator for the Joint Forces, Lynn Smith.
And they'll all receive one of the packages that we're preparing here today, sort of slightly larger than a shoebox and packed full of treats that we're used to here in New Zealand but often aren't available to the person who's up on a hill in Lebanon observing what's going on there, or in Korea on the demilitarised zone, or in South Sudan living in the bush. So it's just a little reminder of home and a reminder that they're all in our thoughts at Christmas time.
The Deputy Commander of the Joint Forces, Air Commander Kevin McAvoy, is working shoulder to shoulder with the troops, adding chocolate puddings to the boxes. He says he appreciated the care packages when he was in the field.
I remember one actually was an Easter parcel full of chocolate, and there was nothing quite like a pineapple lump on the day where you sort of felt a bit bereft of family and friends and things were pretty tough, and it's really important for us to make sure that the troops know that we're thinking of them on a Christmas day.
Next to him is retired Rear Admiral Jack Steer, the former Navy chief, who's now the chief executive of the RSA. Okay, what are you in charge of packing?
So I'm doing talcum powder, which is, probably a pretty Navy thing, and steamy chocolate puddings, and now we're packing them. They fly off this afternoon, and at Christmas these young men and women get to open this, and it's a little bit of home. It's wonderful.
There's some very young recruits here, a group of kids from Mount Cook School in Wellington, who along with children from Collingwood Area School have handmade Christmas cards for the troops. Leah Neva Soul, who's 11, is a big admirer of the work the armed forces do.
I think it's really important, and I think it's especially important that we send them these cards and they know that we appreciate their work a lot.
Hi, what's your name?
My name's Eddie.
Eddie, you're in charge of the butter microwave popcorn there?
Yeah.
Big job, Eddie.
Yeah.
So what are you doing here today?
We're just here to pack some boxes, and they go to the army overseas. They're away for Christmas, so they're away from their families. These boxes are filled with a little bit of home.
RSA President B.J. Clark served 21 years in the army. He remembers receiving a package while in Antarctica in 1986.
I think we had a can of leopard beer, some tuatua soup. It was probably about 8 or 9 items, but even that we really appreciated knowing that someone was thinking of us at Christmas.
New Zealand currently has 300 Defence Force personnel serving in 13 missions overseas, mainly based in the Middle East, but also as far afield as South Sudan. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
28 minutes past 6. If you watched, you just saw me get caught out by a camera change. There's only 3 cameras. I don't know how I can get that wrong. How can the ministry and DHB have the right to be unavailable? Asked Jeremy. They are public appointments and are meant to be responsible to us. There is no legitimate reason for their refusal to front up and explain. Yes, we've had real trouble getting the ministry in particular to appear on Checkpoint during a couple of months now of covering fiscal pressures, staff pressures and general pressures on DHBs throughout the country. The Minister has fronted on occasion. The Ministry just doesn't front at all. It's 29 minutes past 6, which means in about a minute Katrina will be along with the headlines, and then our rolling coverage throughout the night of the Silver Scrolls will begin with Richard Langston, who had a fanzine in Dunedin when Flying Nun began called Garage. I suspect he was probably the first scroll ever to write about the clean who are being inducted into the Hall of Fame tonight. So those boys will be loving it. And then the Music 101 team and Jesse Mulligan and all the people down in Dunedin will be along with live coverage throughout the night of the Silver Scrolls. The finalists in the Silver Scrolls are Aldous Harding, who is a particular favourite of Checkpoint, Beck Ronga, Chelsea Jade, Lord and Nadia Reid. That is a very, very impressive quintet. Aldous Harding, Beck Ronga, Chelsea Jade, Lord and Nadia Reid. One of them will win the Silver Scroll. Who will it be? Stay with us to find out. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The entire population on Ambai in Vanuatu has been ordered to evacuate, but some people who don't want to leave. The Auckland Council is to get a dedicated Maori seat, but only if the government agrees to a law change. The Maori Party says Winston Peters has dropped his party's pledge to hold a referendum on abolishing the Maori seats because he knows that would have galvanised Maori support for her party. 98% of nurses at Counties Manukau are coping with staff shortages, and 93% say they've reached the limit of safe practice. The Playboy founder Hugh Hefner has died. Moving Franz Joseph could be an option to protect the town from the volatile alpine fault, but the mayor says this could be unaffordable. And an Australian health blogger who falsely claimed to have cured herself of cancer with alternative therapy